This is Garis book readings of my 2 published paper books, written by and read aloud by Prof. Dr. Hugo Garis. Email profhugodegaris@yahoo.com. Website profhugodegaris.wordpress.com. This is chapter 8, entitled Questions, taken from my book The Artilect War, Cosmists versus Terrans, a bitter controversy concerning whether humanity should build godlike, massively intelligent machines. Chapter 8. Questions. In this chapter, I want to raise some questions that may have occurred to you in reading this book. Perhaps you are skeptical of some of my arguments or feel that I have overlooked something. I will try to anticipate some of your objections in this chapter. Hopefully, by playing devil's advocate with myself, I may strengthen the arguments of the preceding chapters. These questions, or anticipated objections, have several sources. Some are my own, some are from friends of mine, but most are from feedback that I've obtained from people who have contacted me over the years, who have read earlier drafts of my ideas on my website, who have read reports or seen TV programs on my ideas. Some of this feedback is quite critical, so if you find my reply to these critics convincing, then perhaps you may be convinced if you have similar objections. Question 1. The timing problem. What if the Artilects develop too fast for an Artilect debate to develop? Of all the questions I received, the following made me think the most. It was a fundamental criticism, I thought, so much so that I wrote about it in chapter 6 when I was discussing the singularity. Essentially, the argument here is that if the rise of the Artilect is too fast, then there'll be no time for the social creation of the Cosmist-Terran dichotomy, thus destroying the whole point of this book. Without the dichotomy, there will be no Artilect debate and no Artilect war. Dear Professor Garis, following a link from the CNN site, I have recently come across your article on moral dilemmas concerning the ultra-intelligent machine. I was fascinated to read, and although I am not an expert in these fields, I dare say I agree with your opinions in most respects. However, one aspect struck me as a bit incoherent, if you'll forgive me my saying so. This point is your vision of Terrans and Cosmists. In order for such factions to arise, the power to create electronic brains would have to be within reasonable reach. Maybe electronic brains would already exist. This is where I see the conflict in your thesis. Would artificial intelligence, being protected and nurtured by the Cosmists, not make the argument redundant? I agree with you that such electronic brains could evolve at an exponential rate. Therefore, soon enough, the question whether they do or do not evolve into a species hostile towards mankind would be answered before the leading intellects of Cosmists and Terrans would even get a chance at finishing with all their arguments and discussions. This would be before, assuming these human intellects were reasonably civilized. They would even consider making war on each other. I hope not to offend you in any manner with this view of mine, and would be delighted to hear what you think of it. Reply. I agree with the main point being made here. I rephrase this point to be, quote, if the electronic brains, that is Artilects, evolve at rapid exponential rates, for example, reaching human intelligence levels or beyond within the next few decades, then there will not be enough time for the Terran-Cosmist conflict nor an Artilect war to arise. I do think that artilectual progress will be exponential, but not so rapid that there will not be enough time for the Artilect debate to rage and a possible Artilect war to get started. The reason I think this is because the task to create true artificial intelligence is an enormously difficult one that will probably take humanity many decades to achieve. At the present time, we know very little about how the brain functions, what the nature of memory is, what a thought is, how we reason, etc. There are a quadrillion, that's 1,000 trillion, synapses, that's interneural connections, in the human brain, showing clearly how massively complex the brain's architecture is. I suspect The most realistic scenario concerning human progress in neuroscience research is that it will take at least 50 years from now to even begin to make real achievements in making artificial brains, and that progress after that will still be relatively slow, although exponential. I believe that early Artilects will be smart enough to cause Terrans to raise the alarm. People like me will be warning the public of what is coming, but subsequent progress will not be rapid enough, I believe, for there to be too little time for the public to react. The public will not need many decades to react once they begin to see real signs of intelligence in their household products. I think only 5 to 10 years will be enough for the public and governments to really get moving if they feel strongly that there is a genuine and powerful threat to their species' dominance, to their survival. Also, the socially conscious brain builders will not be slow in warning the public when they feel that progress in the research labs warrants it. I, for example, intend keeping the public well informed on how the world's Artilects are doing, even if they are in a primitive state at the moment. The brain builder researchers are in a position to be the first to know what is happening, since obviously it is we who are making these things happen. I feel we have a moral duty to tell the public what is going on, so that the public does have time to react, just in case the rise in exponential intelligence growth curve of the Artilects is more rapid than the brain builders anticipate. I also feel that the brain builders should be warning the public now, rather than waiting for the first signs of real intelligence in their Artilects. This also gives the public more time to react, but of course if the public sees no evidence of real intelligence, then they will feel the researchers are crying wolf and learn to ignore them. The brain builders need to educate the public about the nature of an exponential curve, which doubles its height up the vertical axis of a graph for every unit step along the horizontal axis. Such curves can start off very slowly and remain at a very low level for quite a while, and then suddenly shoot up rapidly. For example, consider the following doubling graph, which lists the heights up the vertical axis for each unit step along the horizontal axis: 0.1, 0.2, 0.4, 0.8, 1.6, 3.2, 6.4, 12.8, all low values, but 25.6, 51.2, 102.4, 204.8, 409.6, starting to climb, 819.2, 1638.4, 3276.8, 6553.6, shooting up, ... 104,857.6, 209,715.2, 419,430.4, exploding ... off the scale. If the timing is such that the number of years, call it the climbing time, between A, the first signs of artilectual intelligence, and B, the beginning of explosive exponential artilectual growth is only a few years, then there will be no Artilect debate and no Artilect war, unless it is a species dominance war between the Artilects and the humans. I believe that that period of time, the so-called climbing time, will be decades long, due to the inherent difficulty of brain building. This will be plenty of time for the public to react, to debate, and to form Cosmist Terran factions. Question 2. What about the third group, the Cyborgs? Cyborgists, Cyborgings. Quite a few people have emailed me saying that I underemphasize the importance of a third category of human beings in the Artilect debate, other than the Cosmists and the Terrans, namely the Cyborgs, the cybernetic organisms. Cyborgs are creatures who are part human, part machine, for example, by attaching Artilect computer parts to their human brains. Below is a typical comment of this kind. It's followed by the idea of downloading the contents of human brains into Artilects, and then seeing the Artilects develop from there. Dear Professor Garis, I read with interest your article on Artilects, Moral Dilemmas Concerning the Ultra-Intelligent Machine. As an admittedly unqualified commentator, I think a third group or subgroup has been overlooked, Cyborgs. It's obvious to me that humans are going to want to expand themselves both mentally and physically as the technology becomes available. I foresee a gradual phase out of the natural human form to an incredibly varied collection of genetically engineered and programmed cyborgs? Reply. When I first began to think about the political implications of the rise of the Artilect in the 21st century, I did consider splitting society into 3, not 2, main groups. That is, the Cosmists, the Terrans, both of which are human groups, and the Cyborgs, part human, part Artilect. I thought about this for a while and decided against it with some measure of compromise as seen in earlier chapters, for several reasons, which I will explain here. Firstly, I wanted to keep my scenario simple, that is, with only 2 main factions. I could easily include the Cyborgs into the Cosmists faction as a subgroup. The other main reason is that I imagine as the Cyborgs become increasingly less human and more like pure Artilects, that is, with no human component, by adding more and more artilectual components to themselves, the Terrans would treat them as Artilects and hate them as they would the Cosmists. I wrote about this in chapter 5 on the Terran distrust of the Cyborgs argument. A third argument is more a matter of numbers. An asteroid-sized Artilect would have 10 to the power 40 components, atoms. This so dwarfs a human's pitiful 10 to the power 10 neurons that human beings who decide to transform themselves step by step, component by component, into Artilects of such size would be negligibly different from pure Artilects built from scratch. Thus there's not much point making a distinction between Artilects and advanced Cyborgs, at least from the point of view of a Terran. I do agree with the criticism, however, that during the transition phase, when Artilects are not very big and not massively more intelligent than human beings, then the relative contributions to a Cyborg's total performance from the human part and from the Artilect part might be comparable. Under these circumstances, it would be useful to make a distinction between a Cyborg and an Artilect. However, as the Artilects become massive in both size and intelligence, because extra intelligence usually needs extra mass, this distinction will fade into insignificance. Dear Professor de Garis, when you talk of computers taking over, have you ever thought of the transfer of human memories and thoughts to intelligent machines? That seems more like an evolutionary step forward to me. Those machines that have a much greater capacity to learn and use logic than the brains that our thoughts now inhabit would have our thoughts and memories as a foundation. Humans would feel that they were still alive, and maybe they would be inside the computer. I read something in Discover magazine how it would be possible to transfer a human brain to a computer within 50 years. I agree with you that people must evolve and that we are at the point where humans control their evolution. I think that inserting our own memory banks into the Artilect would help this evolutionary process succeed. Reply. As I mentioned in chapter 3, which discusses the Artilect enabling technologies, I thought it would be possible within 20 years or so to scan the brain and download its contents into a hypercomputer for analysis. Maybe it'll take 50 years or more from now for the quality of the scan to be good enough to capture full human functional capacity. Of course, the hypercomputer that is downloaded into may then be made into an Artilect by virtue of having a human brain equivalent inside it. Such a hypercomputer could be considered a cyborg in a functional sense. As above, once the Artilect really starts adding to its mass and its intelligence, the cyborg, human, component will be dwarfed until the cyborg is virtually indistinguishable from a pure Artilect. However, this variant of a cyborg has the attraction that it gives those human beings who are scanned the status of being immortal. For this reason alone, probably many human beings will choose to be scanned. Just how the Terrans will react to such download computers containing human brains is debatable. See chapter 5. On the one hand, the Terrans will probably be horrified at the idea of disembodied, or rather re-embodied brains, and viscerally reject them as alien. On the other hand, if the human component of these machines dominates, then the Terrans may find themselves relatively less alien than pure Artilects, and hence reject them less. The cyborg variant on the Cosmist Terran theme certainly complicates my thesis a bit. You may enjoy the greater level of richness it gives to the Artilect debate, or you may prefer to keep things simple by concentrating upon the Cosmist Terran debate and worrying about the complexities later. In writing this book, I chose to keep things fairly simple, at least initially. Question 3. Why not a sweetness and light scenario? A lot of people think I go overboard when I predict a major war over the Artilect question. They think it's quite possible that Artilects and humans will be able to live together in a sweetness and light type harmony. For example, here are two such opinions. Dear Professor de Garis, I've read some of your Artilect essays, and I'm more or less in agreement with you that one of the great debates of this century will be over the definition of the word human. However, in your essays and in a report entitled Swiss Scientists Warn of Robot Armageddon on CNN.com, I think you exaggerate the possibility that differences between meat humans and non-meat humans will lead to warfare. This sort of knee-jerk anti-Artilect sentiment is expressed in bad science fiction like the Terminator movies and really doesn't deserve to be played up in serious discussion of the subject. What we, transhuman/extropian/cosmist individuals and societies ought to do is emphasize that Artilects, when developed, should not be treated as slaves, but rather should be treated with the same respect for their existence that we would give to any human. Just because humans have evolved past apes does not give us any inclination to exterminate apes. Just because another individual shares the same desire as you to live and produce wealth through the acquisition and processing of resources does not mean that they are a threat to you deserving death. Reply. This liberal-sounding view, I think, is rather naive, because it is based on trust. That is, the trust shown by humans that the Artilects will always be nice to us. I think it misses the key concept of risk. It would be wonderful if human beings could be 100% sure that the Artilects, and especially the advanced Artilects, would always treat us the way we would want, but we cannot be sure. Artilects will have to be built, I'm arguing, by using evolutionary engineering techniques, as I've argued in this book, Chapter 5, and therefore we could never be sure their circuits will be ethical in the human sense. The Artilects may coldly decide that humans are a pest, or that humans are so inferior relative to them that exterminating us would be a matter of total indifference from their perspective. To them, killing human beings would be like us killing mosquitoes or walking on ants. Since the stake is the survival of the whole human species, I don't think the Terrans will tolerate the risk. They may hope for the best, but their leaders will plan for the worst. That is, in the limit, they will plan for a war against the Cosmists if the latter truly threaten to build advanced Artilects. I don't think humans will treat the Artilects as slaves. Well, they may, possibly, at first, when the early Artilects are just dumb robots. What really worries me is the reverse case. Look at how humans treat cows, pigs, ducks, etc. We feel we are so superior to them, and because their meat is so tasty to us, we care nothing about butchering them, unless you're a vegan. During the transition phase, when Artilects are of roughly human intelligence, there's a case for treating them as equals, but in a sense they are not our equals, because they have the capacity to quickly surpass us, and to surpass us massively. Human beings are very limited relative to Artilects. Our brain volumes are fixed. We think very slowly and learn very slowly. An Artilect of human intelligence at a given moment becomes a genius an hour later. It thinks at least 1,000,000 times faster than we do, remember. If it arranges to increase its memory size, etc., then its capacities can increase rapidly. My feeling is that this critic is giving too human an image to the Artilects. They may be very different from us, and potentially enormously superior to us. This is one of the main points I have tried to make in this book. Also, I feel this critic seriously underestimates the strength of human fear, Terran fear, as humans come to terms with the risks of living with advanced Artilects. We would have to trust them not to kill us. Most Terrans would rather not have to face that risk. They would prefer to deal with the devil they know, that is Cosmists, who are at least human, with whom they have at least a 50-50 chance of defeating in a war, than a 0 chance against advanced Artilects, if ever the Artilects exist and decide that humans must go. This critic is not being political enough. He is not facing the tough realities. He would be unsuitable as a general or a political leader. Dear Professor de Garis, I was lucky to be in the audience at your talk at the Computer Science Department at the University of Melbourne. Like you, I believe we ought to be thinking hard about the various possible futures that may come with what you call Artilects. Obviously, I don't know exactly what the future will bring, technologically, politically, or even metaphysically, but I have envisaged a scenario somewhat different to your doomsday type picture. Instead of our being rapidly outclassed by superior Artilects, we may find Artilects gradually integrated into human forms of life, accepted as one of us, and in the long run find that having human bodies, being Homo sapiens, is not really all that important to being human. In other words, we may find that gradually they become us and we become them. Reply: I agree that some human beings will want to become cyborgs and live in harmony with other like-minded cyborgs, all en route to becoming advanced Artilects. But the idea that everyone will want to do this is again naive and unrealistic. Think about it. If human beings are to become cyborgs, this implies by definition changing their brains to some extent, probably by adding high-tech components. This will change their behaviours. How will the Terrans react to such cyborgs? Will young mothers accept that their babies be modified? Won't most mothers in reality be repelled by the idea? Won't most feel that their babies will become monsters in some sense, either to look at, or if the implants are invisible, the growing child would seem alien in some deep, very disquieting, non-human way? The Terrans would distrust the cyborgs and push them away towards the Cosmists. It's even possible that the reality of cyborg behaviour may make many Cosmists reconsider their Cosmist opinions and revert to being Terrans. This in turn may create real problems and greater complexities in the Cosmist colonies. The cyborgs may need to ally themselves with the Cosmists if they are to receive any level of acceptance from human beings. I just don't see them becoming us and we becoming them. I just see distrust, hatred, and in the longer term, war. Sorry, but I think I'm being more realistic. Question 4. Why not just use the kill switch? Many people have said to me, what's the problem? If the Artilects get too big for their boots, just unplug them, use the kill switch, etc. This opinion, I think, is based on an overgeneralization of their own experience of switching off their computers when they misbehave. Dear Professor Garis, I was going through the stuff you guys create. Continue to create such machines is for the better, but create a bomb inside each of your specimens that can be controlled by us. That makes them smart, but us their masters. Reply: if the bomb-triggerable Artilect has near human level intelligence, it will be aware that it can be destroyed by humans. That would make humans very threatening to Artilects. There are at least two issues here. One is whether humans could put kill switches or place bombs in every Artilect, and the other issue is, would it be wise to do so? In an isolated Artilect that has no connections to others, such a bomb attachment idea might work, but how would you do something similar with a network that achieves Artilect level intelligence? The only way to kill such a network would be destroy all of it, but the cost of that to humans might be too high. For example, to make an analogy, if the internet and all the world's computers were destroyed tomorrow, millions of people would suddenly be out of work and would probably starve. The disruption and human costs would be enormous. As Artilects get smarter, they may be as aware of their attached bomb or kill switch as would a human being who carried around an embedded poison capsule that could be triggered by someone else. It would be like living under a guillotine blade, just waiting for it to fall and not knowing when. A smart Artilect, assuming it had a survival instinct, would then be strongly motivated to remove the problem. If it were smart enough, it might bribe its human masters to remove the threat to its existence. In return, it could give the human liberator some substantial reward, e.g. money, or the cure for cancer, etc. The smarter the Artilects become, and the more distributed they are, the less practical does the kill switch idea become. Question 5. Could we apply Asimov's 3 laws of robotics to Artilects? Asimov was one of the most famous science fiction writers who ever lived. His word robotics is known over most of the planet. Asimov wrote about many scientific and science fiction topics, including how human-level intelligent robots might interact with human beings. He gave the positronic brains of his robots a programming that forced them to behave well towards their human masters. The robots were not allowed to harm human beings. Several people have suggested to me that Artilects be designed in a similar way, so that it would be impossible for them to harm human beings. The following critic sent me a very brief, but to the point, recommendation on this topic. Comment. Dear Professor Garis, I'm in favour of developing ultra-intelligent machines. One thought, intelligent or not, machines of this nature require some sort of BIOS, B-I-O-S, basic input-output system, which interfaces between a computer's hardware and its operating system program. Is it possible to instill respect for humanity in the BIOS of early versions of the Artilects? This programming would then replicate itself in future generations of these machines. Reply. Asimov was writing his robot stories in the 1950s, so I doubt he had a good feel for what now passes as the field of complex systems. His laws of robotics may be appropriate for fairly simple deterministic systems that human engineers can design, but seems naive when faced with the complexities of a human brain. I doubt very much that human engineers will ever design a human brain in the traditional top-down blueprinted manner. This is a very real issue for me because I'm a brain builder. I use evolutionary engineering techniques to build my artificial brains. The price one pays for using such techniques is that one loses any hope of having a full understanding of how the artificial brain functions. If one is using evolutionary techniques to combine the inputs and outputs of many neural circuit modules, then the behavior of the total system becomes quite unpredictable. One can only observe the outcome and build up an empirical experience of the artificial brain's behavior. For Asimov's laws of robotics to work, the engineers in Asimov's imagination who designed the robots must have had abilities superior to those of real human engineers. The artificial positronic brains of their robots must have been of comparable complexity to human brains, otherwise they would not have been able to behave at human levels. The artificial brains that real brain builders will build will not be controllable in an Asimovian way. There will be too many complexities, too many unknowns, too many surprises, too many unanticipated interactions between zillions of possible circuit combinations to be able to predict ahead of time how a complex artificial brain creature will behave. The first time I read about Asimov's laws of robotics as a teenager, my immediate intuition was one of rejection. This idea of his is naive, I thought. I still think that, and now I'm a brain builder in reality, not just the science fiction kind. So, there's no quick fix a la Asimov to solve the Artilect problem. There will always be a risk that the Artilects will surprise human beings with their artilectual behavior. That is what this book is largely about. Can humanity run the risk that Artilects might decide to eliminate the human species? Human beings could not build circuitry that prohibited this. If we tried, then random mutations of the circuit growth instructions would lead to different circuits being grown, which would make the Artilects behave differently and in unpredictable ways. If Artilects are to improve, to reach ultra-intelligence, they will need to evolve. But evolution is unpredictable. The unpredictability of mutated, evolving Artilect behavior makes the Artilects potentially very dangerous to human beings. Another simple counter-argument to Asimov is that once the Artilects become smart enough, they could simply undo the human programming if they chose to. Question 6. Why give them razor blades? It seems common sense not to give razor blades to babies because they'll only harm themselves. Babies don't have the knowledge to realize that razor blades are dangerous, nor the dexterity to be able to handle them carefully. A similar argument holds in many countries concerning the inadvisability of permitting private citizens to have guns. Giving such permission would only create an American scale gun murder rate, with most of these gun murders occurring